Hello, YouTube land. This is Brenton Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. If anyone out there has a story they would like to share, you can go to email me at brentonson@gmail.com, and I'll leave that in the description. If anybody wants to contribute to help with the show, you can go to PayPal me. That link will be in the description. It's a one-step process. It's really easy to use, and I appreciate every contribution. Today we have a guest that has a few different types of stories. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll get into his stories. So, buddy, if you would, just introduce yourself and where you're from, and then we'll get your stories going.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Dan. I live in Oregon. I live in the Portland metro area right now, but I grew up in the far northeastern corner of the state and the high desert mountains near the Oregon-Idaho border. And other than that, I guess I'm just a regular working guy like anybody else.
Yeah, that area up there, I would love to go up there and check it out. It just looks so squatchy to me. The woods and stuff just looks primitive whenever I've just seen pictures from up in there.
Yeah, now that I've learned more about Bigfoot in general over the years, it really is. I can definitely picture it because, while there's roads, there's logging roads and even, Forest Service gravel roads back in there, they keep cutting more of them out. But even when there was a lot of them, there's still just miles and miles and miles of trackless land. Like nobody ever goes back in there. And in the winter, the snow is so deep, you can't get in there with no matter what kind of equipment you have. And in the summer, being high desert like that, it gets so hot and arid, there's just no water. You're lucky if you come across it. So, it's to humans, can be pretty inhospitable, but to something that's trying to stay away from people, yeah, now that I think about it, it seems like a pretty good area for it.
Right. And I think that's one thing people don't realize is how much really land there is that's not built up. A lot of people, I hear them say that we're encroaching all over and and they don't have anywhere to live no more, and that's just not true. You look at places like Utah, man, how many state parks and refuge areas, it's, just tremendous amount of acres. More of it's wild than it is built,
Right, and it's worldwide too. I think the last numbers I saw, which was years ago, probably 2005 or 6, it was pretty much 50-50 as far as foot surveyed land on the planet. So, I've heard somebody describe it as we're the masters of all we survey, but we certainly don't survey everything. Not even half of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some places that people have never even put their foot on. Yeah, like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. That's for sure. So there's lots of areas for them to live and stay hidden and what have you. But anyway, you have a few stories that you've collected. Can we get into those now?
Sure. The one I think that I really originally emailed you about, it was something that, while I came to this from kind of a general pop culture sort of outlook on Bigfoot and everything, like there's a lot of stories about it, I'm sure, but it's probably just an urban myth, This situation, I never saw anything or anything, but this situation definitely kind of slapped at my face that there has to be more to it than just people's stories. So I am friends with some people, and I'm not going to give the name of the exact location because the nature of the story is that if I were to tell you where it was at, any person listening could go to this exact spot, and I don't really want to be a part of anybody doing that because I don't want anybody to get hurt. I want discovery and us to know more about things, but I just don't want to send people directly to where this happened. So some friends of mine live not too far, I suppose, outside of the metro area and very near a lake. Very outdoorsy people. They lived out there for years and years, and certainly not the type of people that they wouldn't even entertain anything like Bigfoot or I mean, they won't even talk about anything that might possibly could be some sort of corruption in government or anything. Like, they're just the type of people that wouldn't even entertain it, and they're certainly not storytellers, but very outdoorsy people, and they live kind of out in the woods, and they oftentimes walk miles and miles from their front door to the shores of this lake that's out in the mountains, and they do it all the time. And one of them, I guess, is pretty much semi-retired, and the other one's job is such that it gives them a lot of time, especially in the summertime. They practically live up there. So anyway, she told us, really freaked out. We used to go up there and spend a lot of time with them in the summer. And she really freaked out, told us about this incident she had. And there's a trail that goes all the way around this lake. And the way that it's set up is there's a big lower end and then a smaller upper end. And in between those two, there's these points, these hills, rocky hills come together. And it's up in the, evergreen forest, upper montane sort of forest. So lots of mountains, and then there's kind of rocky points that come together, and the trail goes all the way around them because it's like shale rock and very steep and stuff, with like very thick thickets of, like more like juniper trees, things like that, and also laurels and stuff because it's kind of rainforest. So anyway, she decided one dusk to walk off the trail and walk over to one of those points and watch the sunset, because it's pretty from that area, and you can look down on the lake and the narrows of the lake there. Anyway, as she's walking, she was going past very near the point where you can look off, and she was going past a thicket, and she heard what I now know, what she described as the classic Bigfoot yell scream thing. She started like really low, like, organ shaking sort of low, and then culminated in a really, really high pitched scream almost. And she said that she felt completely compelled, like she wasn't in control of her body. It was like total fear and go the other direction. She said she felt like somebody put a hand on the top of her head, turned her around, and walked her back the other way. And she said she was halfway back to camp before it really set in what had just happened. And, for somebody like that who had never believed in, life outdoors, I spent most of my life outdoors, never seen anything like that or heard anything like that. So it freaked her out, and we went up there, I don't know, maybe a couple days later, in the daytime to that exact spot, didn't see anything. She said that she thought that she heard some odd, knocking on wood, which once again, it sounds, now that I know more, it sounds like wood knocking. She said on her side of the lake and then on the other side of the lake right before that incident occurred. So what made that story so believable overall to me, because we didn't find anything. We went up there, nothing at all. We kind of went around through every little thicket. No tracks, no hair, nothing. We found nothing. But we basically went up there for her sake. And I know that she felt like we didn't believe her, and I didn't have any reason not to, but we didn't have any reason to either. So anyway, years later, and as I said last time we talked, I think it's Kansas City, but there was two different trips that were close to each other. It could have been Kansas City or Vegas, but I think it was a Kansas City airport. I was at a layover, and I was sitting in the hotel bar ordering some food and having a drink, and sitting next to a guy, and we had the general traveler's conversation about where he's from and all that stuff. What do you do? And I told him where I was from, and he, told him I lived in the Portland metro area, and he said that he used to come over here canoeing with a friend. And he said he used to love to do it, but he didn't do it anymore. And I asked him where in the area they used to go, and I told him the lake that we used to go camping at a lot, and his face drained of all blood. He looked pretty much as terrified as I've ever seen a human being look. And then in the middle of a packed hotel bar, he starts telling me this story about how him and his friend at dusk are rowing across the exact same lake in the exact same spot, headed from the bigger side of the lake to the smaller side of the lake, going through the narrows. So as they were going forward, this point that I was talking about would have been to their left, right at dusk, and he said he described the exact same thing, and they were much further away. But I mean, you can't really get more than maybe 75 yards away from where that point is to the surface of the water. So he said the same thing, like described the exact same kind of sound, the bone shaking sort of low all the way up to the terrifying high pitch. And he said that him and his friend turned around as fast as they could, and he said he'd never rode that fast in his life, and he said that ever since then he's never returned to Oregon in general because it scared him so bad. And I could tell when he got done telling me the story that he couldn't really believe that he just told me the story, and I couldn't believe that he was telling me the story because he was describing the exact same story that my friend had told me about the literal exact same place. So to me, I don't see how it cannot be true. It would have had to have been like the biggest practical joke in the world for those two to somehow set that up when, there's no way she would have even known I was traveling at that time. There's just no way that they knew each other. So yeah, that's one of the most recent stories I've ever heard. And it definitely, I don't know. It made me look into things a hell of a lot more and take it a lot more seriously than I ever have.
Right. Did he describe it as altering him physically too?
Not really altering it. Just he just said they were terrified and they didn't think. And well, I guess he did say something about, they were loaded up and driven halfway down the mountain before it really set in what had just happened, and they started talking about it, him and his friend. So I guess, yeah, pretty much the same response. But I don't know if that's anything supernatural or just basic adrenaline terror,
Yeah, or maybe infrasound, because the vocal mechanism to be able to go from such a low to such a high, it seems to me like there's like the extra like vocal system that Wes talks about.
Right.
Yeah,
more than one. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so they're able to have like one set of something going on, but also may even have like an infrasound that you're not hearing, or even an ultrasound that has effect on people, like in the scripture,
right?
Angels would smite people with, and it would have the same kind of effects. It would drive, people out with fear. When these angels smote people, a lot of times it would drive them out with fear, or it would cause madness, or just all kinds of different things. Sometimes they wouldn't remember, and they would basically be kind of like abducted, like the Syrian army. Or no, I think it was Palestinian army when Elijah and his servant were surrounded, and the angels came down and smote that whole army. And then he said, the guy you're looking for is not here, and he led them to the next town over, and then asked God to open their eyes, and then they realized they had been abducted. They're like, "How did we get here?" It was like an abduction scenario. So it was like. And I hear of that too. Scott Carpenter had that happen to him, and the only reason he found out about it is because he was on a phone call when it happened. He said then he remembered he was off the trail, and he turned around and he was looking at this Bigfoot, and then the next thing he knows, he was on the trail walking. He doesn't remember.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember hearing that, him telling that story. And
right.
It's weird. Like now, looking back where I grew up, it's desolate. And my parents owned a small logging company, wood products. And like I said, during a portion of the winter, you just can't get out there. And a portion of the summer, it's so hot that the Forest Service won't let you out there because you could stare at something to make it burst into flames. The fire danger index is just through the roof most summers out there. So we would build rangeland fences, like barbed wire and tension fences for Forest Service and BLM and private parties too. So I spent a lot of time, half of my life growing up was literally out in the woods on top of a mountain. And especially being a little kid, people now talking about how Bigfoot will lure kids away with pine cones and things like that, get your attention with that, and just messing with people in general. I remember times walking around, especially when I was little, 8, 9, 10 years old, having things like that happen, like a pine cone come out of nowhere, or a small pebble or something, and you always just, justify it somehow in your head, you rationalize it.
Yeah,
but looking back on it,
yeah, it's kind of like that fell out of the tree, but a
right,
rock isn't going to fall out of the tree, and
right. But I'm thinking about things like, well, maybe a branch fell out of the tree and hit another branch and flipped the rock up. Like you look around and there's nothing there, and you're just, after a while, you're just used to the wind blowing and you hear weird sounds and stuff. So I always just brushed it off. But you mentioning that, and me recounting these stories, I do remember a couple times, and it could just be, daydreaming or whatever. But I remember a couple times walking through areas that I've walked through, who knows how many, hundreds of times, literally, just hiking through the woods, and realized that asking myself where the last 10 or 15 minutes went. Like, how did I get here? I never go this way. Why did I go this way?
Yeah, and you
things
can't
like
remember
that.
going. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember anything there. But, sometimes.
That would be a good, if that was a Bigfoot related, that would be a heck of a good mechanism for staying hidden. Just cause you not to remember,
exactly.
It's like because that's exactly what happened. I can't remember. Now, Scott Carpenter, he was on his phone, and I can't remember. I feel like he was leaving a message or what the heck the deal was, but somehow his phone call made him remember the incident, because he realized he had made a phone call, but he didn't remember making that phone call until he saw something on his phone. I can't forget. I can't remember what the scenario it was, but it caused him to remember that. And once he remembered that he had made the phone call, he remembered he had walked off the trail down to the lake part, and when he turned around, he saw this thing. He was staring at it, and then all of a sudden he was walking on the trail again. And I even had like Mark Zaxby tell me him and his girlfriend were walking 45 minutes into the woods, and they saw some like orbs, and next thing they know, they were walking and they were back at the vehicle. And they'd walked 45 minutes into the woods, and they don't know anything about how they got back to their truck.
Wow.
Or car or whatever it was. But yeah, that's very interesting. Because I've had a few scenarios like that myself that I thought back and I was like, what's happened? I don't remember getting here, kind of deal. Yeah.
One of the things that messes with me about that is that I take my young daughter out there in that area now to go camping, generally every summer, at least once, because it's just trackless land. I like to go camping where there's not campgrounds and you're not going to see people really actually roughing it and, engaging in nature. It's just kind of how I grew up. And I definitely want to pass that on to my kiddo. And so we go out there, and I've noticed a couple times you get there's no way I could really describe exactly where it's at, but in my mind, I know where it is, and I've been there, I don't know how many times in my life, because it's just wonderful. There's nobody out there, and it's just one of those places that you find out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. That's just beautiful, and anyway, I love going there. And, I remember the last time.
And they never harm you. They try to hide and avoid you. So,
right, exactly.
And you're a believer, right?
Like, I certainly am now, man.
That makes, like a believer in the Lord, It seems that there's some kind of restrictions similar to, like what there would be on devils and things like that, where they have to go get permission to do something, like in Job or in 2 Kings, and and that kind of stuff, where they would have to go before the Lord and ask permission to do something. Or even like when Jesus talked about that Satan has requested to sift you like wheat. He was talking to his disciples because they were considering the chief seats and stuff. But it seems like, because why would they come up and twist your doorknobs and knock on your house? But they don't. They could break the door down easily. You know, I mean, you know, because
Right.
they can push trees over.
Well, that's what I'm wondering is, and I was going to say it's a little bit disturbing because the same kind of incidences in the place I'm talking about, you know, high upper montane forest, sometimes really, really thick, like lodgepole pine, you know, dog hair thick. You can't walk through it. You can't even see through it. And other areas that, you know, it's larger, coniferous trees, you know, firs and other types of pine and spruce. So it's a little bit more sparse, and you come to areas that are just big kind of open, you know, meadows, grassy areas. And there's this one spot that I was talking about I love going to because it's this big kind of area where there's a few little rolling hills that are just out in the middle of nowhere that are just this beautiful meadow, you know, super high grass that's all matted down for who knows how long, you know. And in the summertime, in the late summertime, it's just kind of Little House on the Prairie looking, you know, like just really tall, wavy field hay. You know, it's just beautiful. And that area is where it was the most difficult to explain where pine cones and things were coming from, because I'm walking through this field, you know, nowhere underneath any trees, but there's a tree line to my left, you know, like 25, 30 yards. Almost the same spot that I always walk through there. And the last couple of times my daughter was with me, as it didn't happen for a long time to me personally, but the last time my daughter was with me, and pine cones were coming out of nowhere, to the point that we were both stopping and looking. And I'm wondering, because I had a 30-06 with me, and she was carrying a 22, a Ruger 22 rifle. So I'm wondering if, as I got older and I started carrying a large caliber rifle with me more and more, if that's why it stopped. But then, you know, it's a little disturbing because my kid was with me, and all of a sudden it happened again. I'm not saying that's what it was, but really difficult to explain where in the world those pine cones are coming from.
Right. To throw something, it takes a thumb. You know, I mean, you got to be able to grasp and throw. And I've had the same kind of experience where I had these like acorn, or nuts of some kind. It was a nut from a tree, falling into the water. But when I got to looking, I thought they were falling from the tree. But when I got to looking, I even have videotape. The water's like 40, 45 feet away from the tree. It wouldn't fall at that kind of angle to get into the water. So it's like,
even if the wind was blowing.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. So, but your mind wants to make it make sense, because it's the last thing you want to think, you know. And that was the same weekend I heard 3 trees, you know, fall. I mean, huge trees. You hear them pop and crack and pow, you know, and then it's like, you know, you hear it fall. And that tree makes a pretty good sound when it falls. And then, you know, the first time, okay, maybe a tree fell. You know, that's possible. A tree could die and fall. But the second time, and then the third time, it's like, that just goes too much of a coincidence. You know what I mean? And and all those things added together, and then finally it ends up being where I had something reach in. I had one reach in the tent and grab a hold of me.
I remember. I remember you watching the video.
Yeah, so that kind of woke me up to the fact that, you know, that's what was going on. And now I'd hear some. I heard a recording of someone that claimed to have a Bigfoot call, and it was like almost like a mad person making a, you know, kind of sound.
Right.
And I was hearing that kind of stuff, and at nighttime I was also hearing whistling. And you know the whistling?
Yeah, that was the other thing. When I was a kid, man, sorry to interrupt, but that was the other thing. Last time we talked, I brought up, but we didn't get to. When I was a kid, remembering hearing hoot owls in the middle of the day that didn't quite sound like a hoot owl. Like, it sounded like a person. Like, nobody, folks, is going to be out where I'm at. You know, the only person that it might have been would have been my stepfather, is, you know, a mountain man of all mountain men from a line of mountain men. He might play a joke on me, but I knew exactly where he was, you know, and a couple of times that this happened, and he wasn't anywhere near me, and there's no human that can move fast enough to, get to where I was. It sounded like somebody was making a hoot owl sound. And furthermore, it was like down on the ground, so in the same general area that I'm talking about. Now that I think about it, whenever I walked in that area, weird stuff kind of happened.
Huh.
I know some other people that still live out there and still go out there. A lot of it's private property and gated off and stuff now too, but I know people that still go out there, have permission to go out there regularly. There's a lot of bear and a lot of cat out there. And each time I go out there, like the population is increased because there's no logging out there anymore or anything, so people aren't out there much. But I'm kind of bound and determined now that we're having this conversation to talk to some of those people and just get to the down and dirty and ask them if they've ever seen anything. Because, that's something we touched on before too. This is not, talking about this stuff is not a way to make friends and influence people. It's not something that a person asks for,
Yeah. But I mean, at some point it's like, who cares? I just ask and,
exactly.
You either believe it or you don't. And I understand why some people don't believe it. It's hard to believe. I mean, because I had stuff happening that I didn't want to believe it, I mean,
I'm not even sure I would believe me.
But over time, when you hear all these stories, and there's so much in common, like especially with the owl sounds, that how many times have you heard that they were hearing a hoot owl, but it didn't sound like a hoot owl; it sounded like something imitating a hoot owl. I mean, I've heard that so many times.
And not just with Bigfoot, with the associations with the so-called alien abductions, right? People seeing the owls with the can't remember what her name was, the lady that they made the Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind or whatever, the movies about her. All of those people seeing owls and then doing the hypnotic regression and realizing
that's where they would be seeing. They would see the owls and there was even one case I remember. It was even linked to a Bigfoot case. They were out in the woods, and they saw an owl fly down, and it turned into like a ball of light and flew off. But they were also having
like Bigfoot.
Yes, right, yeah. And they were also having the Bigfoot activity, so it makes you wonder, in some of these cases where people talk about seeing the orbs and the Bigfoot kind of linked together. There was even one case, I think it was from Kentucky, that where someone saw a Bigfoot kind of walking through their backyard carrying an orb.
Whoa.
Yeah, he was had it in his hand like a ball that was glowing, and it was walking through their backyard, kind of cutting through. And
dude, there's something about owls that just gave me kind of goosebumps. Not kind of gave me goosebumps. Thinking about owls, but I want to get back to that because I was just actually listening to one of your videos earlier about another guy here in Oregon. I think he said he's a pastor. You put a video a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about some sort of sea creature walking out of the ocean, and he wrote a book, and he was talking about how people are not making a distinction between different sorts of creatures, and he was saying something about conehead, like the coneheads are something about there's some sort of genetic difference between them and other creatures that we might refer to as Bigfoot. I can't remember what his name was. He was in a mall or something as you were interviewing him.
Yeah, I remember that story. He talked about some kind of, it seemed like it was like purple light creature or something like that.
A couple different ones. He said somebody came up to a boat, and I didn't want to get off on a tangent about the sea creatures. I was more talking about and I haven't read his book yet. I didn't even look at the description and see what the name of it was yet, but it was very interesting to me that he was talking about that he thinks that there's some sort of distinction between the ones that people describe as having a cone head and I don't know, other ones, I guess, and saying something, and you didn't really get off his perspective on it.
Right. The cone head type, and then there being the round head type.
But that, I mean, multiple different descriptions, right, of these creatures, and oftentimes them having to do with something to do with orbs or UFOs, right? Which may be one and the same, I suppose, from a certain perspective. And then also tying back into owls.
Right.
Because, I mean, it seems like they're all tied together, and which is weird because I don't know if you're aware of the cremation of care thing. They worship, Moloch,
right.
who is the giant owl deity, and that goes, way back into biblical time, Moloch and everything, which makes me very apprehensive about, this entire field. Why are they choosing owls? And so a weird experience that happened in my life that the person that I was with thought it was very weird also. And we were driving through north central-ish Oregon, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And on a that nobody ever drives on, especially at night. And I was in the National Guard. We were headed to drill for the weekend. And so we had left. For me, I was still in school. So for me, it was after school. For her, it was after work. And she lived a couple towns, very small towns over. And so my mom would take me there, drop me off, and she would give me a ride. Anyway, we were singing along to something, and then we started talking about subjects like this and telling each other about our experiences. And then, I mean, this is out in the middle of nowhere, and it's a high desert plain, sagebrush on both sides, long straight stretches of road. And we're driving in the middle of the night, summertime, and getting close to summer, towards the spring, I guess, late spring. And all of a sudden, there's a guy standing in the middle of the road, not walking, not moving, standing in the middle of the road, and swerves around him. And he was wearing it just looked like one of the old, drunk cowboys that are out there, cowboy hat and a long duster, dirty, it could have been just an old cowboy, that was out there camping on a fence line somewhere or whatever, guarding some cattle or something. I don't know. But she swerves around him, and then right after that, we see a coyote run right in front of her. I mean, this is bam, bam, bam. And she swerves around that, and we're freaking out about it because it's in context of us talking about paranormal stuff. And then all of a sudden, the big whitest owl I've ever seen comes out of nowhere, straight down the center of the road, dive bombs her windshield, and then pulls up right before it hits us and flies over us. And the only thing I could think to say, and I don't know where it came from, I just said, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. And she's, put her foot on the gas, and we did not slow down until we got down into the bottom and onto the freeway. She didn't slow down. And, and I haven't thought about that for years until just now when we were talking about owls.
Wow. That's interesting. And it looked like a white apple?
No, a white owl.
A white owl. I thought you said apple. And I was like, dang, that's weird. I never heard of that before.
What the hell is a white apple? No. No, this doesn't go quite that far.
An
owl. Like a big, large barn owl, like bigger, way, like pterodactyl size, but very large, wingspan wider than her little Honda car or whatever it was, hatchback. And,
you do that? Yeah, that's strange because I remember I remember someone telling me about a story where they had a few different encounters with like an owl, and like when they were in their car, and one of them was the thing was flying right beside their driver's side window, and it stayed course, with the car, and they would be looking at it, and it was some kind of just really strange kind of feel to it and what have you, but I mean, it sounded odd because it was like flying right next to the window. They speed up, it would speed up, and it would slow down, it would slow down, and there's some strange stuff going on with that kind of thing. I mean, and you hear it, quite a few times. It's not just like one case, And then I've had someone tell about having 3-foot tall owls. I don't know if you ever seen one of the videos that I have where they were coming out into like this field, and there was I think they said it was 3 foot tall owls, and they kind of didn't want to tell the story, but I got them to tell the story, and it's not the first time I heard about that. There was another case where there was an owl that was like 3 foot tall that was sitting on a fence post, and it was talking to them. Yeah, and in the other case, that it would talk, it was saying stuff to them. It was talking, and it makes you
like
wonder
what were those saying? I
don't remember. And I don't even remember if they were for sure what it was saying, but I just kind of recall. So I've done so many videos, man, it's hard to remember all the facts, of each one.
Yeah,
but you kind of remember the gist of some and what have you. But
right.
But that the fact that there was 3 foot tall, that really stands out. So it's something you can't really forget. And then
I remember. Sorry to interrupt. I remember that incident right there freaking me and my companion out so much that we waited. Of course, we didn't talk about it at drill, or anything, because we didn't want people to think we were crazy. But I remember us telling both of our families when we got back, and they did think we were crazy or thought that it wasn't a big deal, just a incident. But I don't know why that freaked me out so much. But it did, and we both got the same feeling that we both kind of separately came to the conclusion that it felt like something was trying to stop us where we were, like trying to get us to stop.
Yeah, and scriptures talks about the fowl of the air, okay, like referring to them as birds and stuff. And I don't know if you ever remember a story that I did a long time back, where a lady lived in Texas. She was driving home kind of on an old country road because she lived out in the country, and then she ran across a water tower that was out in the field, near her home.
Yeah, that story freaked me out, dude.
Yeah, and there was like these big, tall, like 5-6 foot tall birds dancing in a circle on top of the water tower, and then there was one that looked humanoid that had wings, and it had a white face. His body was all black, and wings was black, and it kind of
like appeared next to her car.
Yeah, and it projected itself down next to the vehicle, and the birds were bird shaped. They were just really tall birds, and they were also black and white, like had white on part of them and black on part of them, and this human shaped creature with these big wings. His face was white, and the rest of it was black. And the wings were like even silky black, kind of really fine down feathers or something like that. And then, and when it came to it like appears in the field, like it almost, what would you say, teleported, like, and it would teleport 10 feet further and 10 feet further until it was like up on the car. Right there, looking at her, and she had her. I think she said she had a Smith and Wesson pistol, and she was gripped on that, like fixing to have to shoot this thing, and she bails out of there. But it was a crazy sounding story, man, and turns out there was like voodoo and witchcraft kind of stuff practiced in that area. And,
man, that's crazy. That's exactly where my mind was going. I was listening.
And remember her saying she had a crow. She had a crow in her backyard walking around and was trying to lead her into the woods. And she followed this crow. And then she was thinking, uh-oh, something's going to kill my... I think she said it was going to kill her dog or something. Because she realized this crow was leading her away from the house.
Oh.
Like a really big crow, like a raven, a black raven or a crow or something, and it was in her backyard, and it would kind of inch away, and she would follow, and then it would inch away a little further, and it led her out into the woods. And then she all of a sudden had in her head, this thing is leading me away so it can take my dog, or I think it was a dog. She thought her dog would get killed, so she hurried back. And that was just a really interesting story. I had a lot of people really like that one.
She was worried more about her dog than she should have been about herself. Yeah.
Right. Yes. What's up with this crow, man? The crow's leading you away. That's not good. But it reminds me of the fowls of the air.
Hmm.
It's kind of a reference
Well, it
to.
reminds me of the story I was just listening to, and I've heard the story more than once too. I was catching up on your last couple videos because you kind of disappeared for a while, and you told me last night that you were sick and stuff for a while. And I was catching up on your last couple and you were recounting during one of them the story of the guy who, when he was a kid, saw somebody rubbing the Vaseline sort of stuff on himself with in the black jar with the golden lid, Vaseline looking stuff with hair in it, and then turning into what we call a dogman or a werewolf, right? And it makes me wonder about, and then the deer man story and like all of that stuff. It makes me wonder about that lady's encounter and weird encounters I've had with birds, not really other animals, but owls, more than one weird encounter with owls. It does make me wonder about, the thing that Skinwalker Ranch guy was talking about observation, surveillance using animals, and like kind of contacting people or even just pestering people using animals, and also humans seeming to want to capture the power of being an animal or a supernatural sort of thing like a dogman. Through paranormal stuff, it seems to have some sort of connection to animals, and oftentimes when the fowl that you're talking about generally seems to tend to be an owl, and I'm wondering why that is. Throughout time.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. I don't know. Tell you the truth, it's really strange. So, do you have any more Bigfoot stories?
I've had people tell me stories about, about they saw one. I remember as a kid, where I grew up, there's a lot of small towns that are relatively close to one another, 20, 25 miles away, but they're all little tiny, you blink and you miss them sort of towns. And so, I don't know, a number of towns away, there was a kid talking about, I guess I'll just tell people Vale, Oregon. There was some orchards around there, and he was talking about how him and his dad were in an orchard one day, and him and his dad both, as long as I knew him, for years and years and years, they swore up and down they saw Bigfoot in that orchard, and that they tried to chase him down. And that's actually one of the things that I was going to get back to is it wouldn't surprise me out in the area that I grew up in, because there's so many bears and cats and stuff that even if interested or curious to try to get your attention, it wouldn't last very long, because, I don't think that there's any creature of the field that doesn't understand what a gun is, at this point. And everybody out there carries at least a large caliber sidearm, if not that, and a large caliber rifle with them. So it doesn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me that there wouldn't be any sort of Bigfoot or anything like that they would do everything they can to not expose themselves to you, because it's not like everybody out there just goes shooting at anything willy-nilly. But if something was crashing through you through the forest or whatever, like these other stories that I hear of people getting the bluff charges and stuff like that, but where I come from, there's only one response you're going to get, because in the mind of those people, I guarantee you, for the most part, it's either a cat or a bear. You're going to die, just to put it bluntly. So I could see how, in those kind of areas where people wouldn't see them, because it doesn't take very long to figure out what a gun can do,
Right. Yeah, that's true. Especially a Bigfoot. I'm sure that they would know what a gun is. Because if they're out there when people are hunting.
Stories of people. I've heard so many stories. I've heard so many stories of people or encountering a Bigfoot, and then the Bigfoot's eyes move to the gun on the hip or in the hands or whatever.
Yeah.
It
I
seems
mean,
like they know what they are.
how many times have they probably seen deer hunters shooting a deer, and things like
Hmm.
that. So
Hmm.
it's not like have to pass the knowledge down. They probably have seen it.
Or
Every,
stealing their
every,
kill.
yeah, and people, the Bigfoot stealing the kill. That's something that's kind of.
Dude, there's one for me right there that I just thought of again. So I'm hunting in, I guess it would be east of where I grew up, kind of southeast, and that whole area, with the exception of a few like volcanic mountains every now and then, is just big rolling hills of sagebrush and buckbrush. And I remember I was on a guided hunt. My stepdad and I used to do a lot of large game guided hunts with people in this particular area, and I had to go to a convention through high school, and so we went out early in the morning, and then I came down the mountain later, and I was the thing that was most concerned with me after I pulled the trigger was the fact that I had left my gutting and skinning knife with my stepdad before I came up the mountain. Anyway, I'm coming down, weirdest situation ever, and I never figured it out. But anyway, I was coming down through this little gully, and when I got down on the bottom, the buckbrush was, oh God, probably 15, 16 feet tall, really tall. So, to the point to where the brushy part was just starting about head high. I'm 5'11", so you can't really see through it. So it's like, really, imagine sagebrush. For people that haven't seen buckbrush before, imagine sagebrush that's like a small tree. So I'm walking through this forest of buckbrush, and I could have swore I saw something whiz by me on my right side that was hairy, and we're out there elk hunting. So immediately pulled my rifle off my shoulder, and I'm looking around, and that was to my right. And I'm walking through this trail that's, obviously a game trail, established trail. I'm walking down this trail, and I see this thing kind of whiz. It was weird because it seemed like back, but I didn't see it to the front of me, so it was strange. It just moved really, really fast, but I could tell it was like brown and hairy, but kind of darker than I would expect those elk to be. And they're kind of more buckskin colored for the most part. Anyway, I had a hair tag, and I saw this thing whiz by, and then the next thing I know, to my left front on the other side of the trail, I see a big old huge dry cow jump up, and she ran up kind of through, because the bottom of this little gully was really flat, and then there was really steep hills on both sides. And so I pulled my gun up, and it scoped the same .6 I was talking about earlier, and I couldn't really see her because of the buckbrush, but she ran up on the side of the hill. And when she ran up on the side of the hill, she stood broadside to me, and I could see her above the buckbrush. One shot, I guarantee, hit her in the heart. She humped up, like just classic hump up. Legs went straight, and she fell straight over sideways. Her legs stayed straight, and the thump, 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 I heard her roll down the hill. And she was, I don't know, I'm not very far, in between 75 and 100 yards away from me, up the hill and forward. And I knew I hit her in the heart, so I didn't, I wasn't hurrying about it. I've seen it plenty of times in my life. She was, she was dead. So I picked up my shell casing, reloaded my rifle, pushed it down, pushed the bolt forward without a round chambered, slung my rifle back over my back, and kind of took my time walking up there. I never found her, to the point that I risked missing the bus that was taking me to the airport so we could go to this conference thing. I went back up the hill, got everybody, brought them back down, and we searched everywhere. There was a blood spot on the side of the hill where I hit her. You could see where she flopped over, blop, 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 every time her body, all the way down to the bottom of the hill until you could see, like, she ran into this big buckbrush when she got to the bottom of the hill. and there was like no drag marks. It didn't look like, we looked everywhere, like maybe she drug her across herself. We're close to this gravel road and in the bottom of this gully, and there was a creek that ran through there and then went through a culvert and into the next field. And usually if you hit an animal and they're wounded but still alive, they will drag themselves downhill, you know. And so we checked everywhere, didn't find a trace of her. But now that we're talking about this, and I just remembered other people talking about their kills getting stolen, it was really weird that I saw that thing on one side of the trail moving blazing fast, and just kind of wrote that off as maybe an elk running in the other direction or something. But then all of a sudden my kill disappeared and we never found her, to the point that I don't think anybody would have even believed that I shot something if there wasn't that blood spot on the ground, because, you know, on the opposite side of where I hit her. And they just figured my stepdad still messes with me to this day. They just figured I wounded her, you know, I winged her and she got away, and that's all it was. But no, man, she humped up classically. I hit when I'm aiming, you know, so anyway, yeah, I don't know if it's connected at all, but that's pretty weird.
Yeah, an animal that big, it would be hard for it to not leave a blood trail leaving the area, you know. If it was able to get up, and you know, if it left a blood trail at the top, a blood trail where you hit it, and, you know. Yeah. And, you know,
and it wasn't a little bit of blood either. It wasn't a little bit of blood. It was, I hit it in the heart, and the heart exploded amount of blood with a 30-06, a 30 caliber slug. You know, that's
right.
Yeah.
Huh. Sounds like you had it stolen to me. You know, no drag marks.
Yeah, I never would have thought of it. I always second guess myself. Yeah, I must have winged her or something, you know. But still, I saw it, pulled the trigger, and I watched her hump up and flop down the hill in the scope. Watched her. You know,
right.
I grew up watching, you know, master outdoorsmen and master marksmen put meat in the freezer with one shot my whole life. That's how I was raised. I was given a single shot rifle. Everybody is given a single shot. You don't, you know, until you can prove that you can hit what you hit, you don't get more rounds than that. Yeah, I know I hit her. I know I did.
Wow. Interesting. Okay. If you have more Bigfoot stories, you can go to those, and if not, go to some of your other...
Not really. I mean, like I said, I've had other people tell me that they've seen Bigfoot, and I could probably recount those all day, but they're not as interesting as... I was talking to you before. One of the other reasons why I hit you up is because you were telling your story about the data, and then I've heard other people talking about shadow people specifically. And another thing that, you know, you don't really know how to take it, I suppose. But something in your description, another one that you gave me when we were talking last night, and then other people's description of these shadow people, is that it seems like they often see them at first as like kind of regular shapes, either large or small, but humanoid, you know, shape with round features and stuff. And kind of metamorphize into very straight and sharp and menacing, sinister sort of shapes. And my friend was telling me about an experience that she had, and you were talking about the little wand thing that got stuck to the side of your head, and how you thought that opened up your perception to be able to see that shadow guy in the room. And she was talking about, she was going through an episode of fever, like she had a really high fever, and then she started seeing these shadow beings and describing them. She's standing in my living room, very animatedly describing them like exactly the same way that I've heard all kinds of other people describe them, that she has no way of knowing. She didn't know who you were until I told her your name, you know. So and then other people I've heard on other people's shows and stuff about that same behavior with shadow people. That's another thing that just hit so close to home for me, that what it, you know, made me realize there's got to be something more to that. Whatever it is, you know, there's got to be something more to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seemed like to me that the Darrow was working with the shadow person, or
Right, using it
vice
to scare the
versa.
hell out of you.
Yeah,
And that's what my friend was saying, was that she felt like they were doing that specifically to scare her.
right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, because the way that the Darrow first, whenever I put the cigarette out on the nightstand there, it grabbed my arm at a perfect timing and twisted it behind my back, and then when I looked up at it, my brain couldn't compute what I was looking at. I just was looking at this thing, and that nose hung down like to his chest, and it was flopping around as it was laughing with this honking laugh, and then that blue around the nose that mesmerized me too. It was like I was looking at this baboon butt blue with these creases,
Right.
that were going, vertical. And then he pulls this wand like device up and sticks it to the side of my head and kind of pushes my head over, and then that was when I seen that doorway open up. And when that creature walked into the doorway, it looked like a regular human shape, but like a solid shadow. But then it started
Right.
contorting and kind of bending stuff the wrong way, and fingers elongating, and like it was trying to scare me. And then
Right.
that was when off to the right of my right, the roar happened, and it scared them because I remember the shadow being looked over and he looked over into the direction that which would have been his left,
Hmm.
and he leaned back like it scared him, whatever was making that sound, and yeah, I mean that was thinking back on it, it was like somehow they were working together,
Right.
and
I wonder if he was handing you over to him,
I don't know.
or if he was just using that wand to give you the perception to be able to see him so that he could scare you into submitting, basically. Um, and that's what I was kind of getting at, is throughout my life I've had these weird things, and one of the weird things is that people will just, on the train, in the grocery store, wherever, people will just come up to me and tell me stuff, like weird stuff that they never told people, or just start telling me their life story. And I'm wondering if that sort of thing happens to people in general, or if it's people that, I don't know, for one reason or another, either have an experience that opens them up to other perceptive experiences, or widespread and people just don't talk about it, or are certain people more perceptive to seeing things like that? Because it's not something I ever asked for,
Right, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, it's hard saying for sure. It seems like there's some people who are more open to their. A lot of times it starts when you're young, so that you have a perception for it.
it did with me.
Yeah, with the first encounter I had was when I was 5 years old with a red being that had the curled ram horns, and then so I always believed in there being strange stuff, because I even had my sister witness that with me, so I couldn't even deny that
Yeah,
happened, because I was wanting to deny it, saying maybe I dreamed or something, but she's like, no, you didn't, I was there, and so I
yeah.
couldn't, so I knew stuff like that was out there, and so it
That's kind
seems
of like a blessing and curse, but having somebody else there with you, you can't you can't deny it, and probably her sanity depends on you not denying it.
right,
So yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. That's crazy.
So you say you had some stuff happen when you were young. What happened with you?
Ghost stuff. When I tell you about when we were talking before in the email, I guess younger than that one that I was just thinking of. My parents, biological father and my stepmom at the time, we lived I guess I'll just tell you, we lived in Ontario, Oregon, which is right on the border of Oregon and Idaho, right on Interstate 84. And my dad's, my stepmom's family lived in Weiser area. And so I assume it was out that way, Weiser, Idaho. I assume it was out that way, but they had some friends that were talking about it on the way out there, and it was a long drive wherever we went. And I was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6. I don't know, in between 4 and 6. And, I remember they were talking on the way out there about, just how far it was and how they couldn't avoid it anymore because these people had been asking them forever to come out to their place or whatever. And I just remember driving seemingly forever, especially for a little early in the morning. And we got there, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, summertime. So long days. And, when we got there, we're nearly there. We dropped down into this little valley. Once again, just big open plains of fields and sagebrush and stuff. And we dropped down into this little valley, had sagebrush hills on both sides. I guess as we were looking at it and driving on it, we were on the left side of this valley, and both sides had sagebrush hills, pretty steep and tall. And then to the right and below us was a bunch of fields between us and the sagebrush hill. And we drove, it seemed like forever down this valley. And then we get down towards the other end, and there's these 2 houses. You could tell were built, who knows how long. I mean, I guess as an adult looking at them, I think they were probably built in like the 40s, just that architecture. And they were set right next to each other. Probably, I don't know, 25, 30 yards in between them. And they were mirror images of one another. 3 stories, I think. Tall, rectangular, long, and narrow. And one of them are my parents' friends lived in. And the other one, you could tell nobody had lived in it for who knows how long. I mean, the front door was all ajar, and there's practically hardly any windows and, actually panes of glass in the windows. And, nobody had lived there for a long time. It was apparent. So, we went into their house and we hung out there for a couple hours or whatever. And our parents were making plans about what we're going to do for the day. And they had 3 boys, I think, one that was near my age, and then 2 successively older boys. And I don't remember how old they were. One of them was a teen or just preteen, I think. Anyway, one of the boys had a room in the attic. And so we were hanging out up there because obviously when you're a little boy, the attic is the coolest room in the house. So we were up there hanging out, and I thought they were just trying to scare me because the boy that was my age said, "Oh, they're just trying to scare you." But they were telling me this ghost story about how they see this ghost in the window that's in the house across the way. And as they're telling me this story, we all see in this window across the way that doesn't have any, it's in the attic also, doesn't have any glass in the window itself. And there's actually kind of classic, I don't know, horror flick ghost story, curtain torn, old, hanging in the window. And we look, and there's a little girl standing, and she herself, I just got chills. She herself was a chrome, like kind of black and white, and almost not quite transparent, but you kind of see through her. And she had the most vivid blue eyes, not like blue, but not the almost transparent ice blue either, kind of in between them, just very piercing blue eyes. And I remember making eye contact with her. And she was wearing like Little House on the Prairie sort of a night gown, but it was like from a richer family than Laura Ingalls, right? Like more lacy, frilly, like more expensive looking. And she had a lump in her throat on her left side that was like the size of a baseball or an orange or something, like just obviously unnatural. And I just freaked us all out. Like, we saw it, they were telling me about this, and we looked over there like almost like a movie. We all looked over there at the same time, saw her, looked at each other, looked back, and she was gone. And we all freaked right the hell out and ran downstairs as fast as we could, started screaming at our parents about this. And my parents were kind of taken aback, but their parents weren't. They were taking it as if they'd heard it before, right? Like they expected it. And so I remember that we didn't go back upstairs, that we did go on like a picnic or something. We got food together. It was a picnic. We got food together and stuff, and we went somewhere and had kind of a picnic out in the outdoors. And I remember our parents were kind of talking about something kind of like away from us, but I didn't think anything of it at the time, I suppose. Anyway, we came back, and everybody remembered what the house was like, and nobody lived out there. Nobody lived out there. There was nobody around to do this, but we showed up, and as we're walking up the walkway, through their yard up to the front door opened up into like kind of the older style kitchen, where the kitchen and the dining room were one and the same, and most of the cooking stuff was off to your right, and the dining room area is kind of to your left. When you open the door, you'd go into the living room. So we could hear like it sounded like music, but it sounded weird, right? Like just weird, and almost kind of like slow-mo, but not. And then I remember all of us walking up to the door at the same time and wondering, you could see it on everybody's face, what is this going on? And opened the door, and there, I swear to everything good, there was a record player open, turned on, with a Warped record. That's what we were hearing, is this Warped record playing, a half-eaten sandwich that nobody had made, and a half-drank glass of milk that nobody had made. And I remember my parents grabbing me. I was an only child at the time. Grabbing me, putting me in the car. My mom and my stepmom and I getting in the car. And my dad immediately. We did not go into the house again, right? Like, it took me to the car. My dad stayed out and had what looked like a rather heated discussion with the father of the other family for a little bit, a number of minutes in the front yard, far enough away that I couldn't hear what they were saying. And then he got in the car and we took off. And I just remember my parents talking about, like, did they invite us out there for that, to show us that? Because I remember they used to live near us, and then they bought this house or whatever, and they moved out in the middle of nowhere, and we didn't see them for a long time when we went out there and visited them, and then we never saw them again. I never saw them again. But anyway, I remember my parents talking about, did they invite us out there for us to see that? Were they trying to scare us or, whatever? But as an adult, I'm wondering if they invited us out there so that somebody else experienced the same thing that they were experiencing, so that they knew they weren't crazy. So that was the youngest. That's the furthest back thing I can think of that was paranormal, and definitely paranormal, and definitely experienced by me and multiple other people that, as far as I know, to this day, still don't talk about it.
Man, that sounds really scary, dude. Where you have a record player and a half-eaten sandwich and milk, half drank. My goodness, that means it was in your house, or where you were staying.
Yeah, it wasn't my house. It was their house. But once again,
right. Yeah.
When we opened the door, it was weird. I just, even as a little kid, I remember the mom and dad were looking at us as if they were seeing what our reaction would be. right?
Right.
So either they were setting us up, right, and doing it on purpose, or like I said, they were making sure other people were experiencing it too, so they knew that they weren't just going nuts, you know. Yeah, it was crazy.
Man,
My
that
parents'
is
house.
pretty scary for real. And
Yeah.
I don't think it's ghosts though. I think it's demonic.
I've been talking to some of my friends recently about experiences they've been having, and through a lot of my research, it keeps coming. Even though you asked me earlier if I'm a believer, I definitely believe that there is a God or a much larger consciousness than us. But one way or another, all of my research always seems to point back to things that were discussed first and foremost. And these things have led me to distrust very much anything like that. Ghosts or people claiming to talk to you from beyond, or even the people saying that they're talking to aliens or anything like that, because we have no way of fact checking that. We have no way of getting a second opinion of who these entities are and what their intentions are. We have no idea. Like, we have none. And as far as I understand it, the Bible says don't mess with any of that stuff, because for the same reason you can be deceived. And I don't see any way that we can't be deceived if we can't fact check it. So yeah, I'm very apprehensive.
Man, that's a crazy story there. Wow. I don't know if you remember the judge who came on and talked about a dogman encounter he had, and then there was he was describing like a little demon or a ghost, that it was like appearing as a small boy that was talking to his child, and his name was Wind.
Yeah, and trying to lead his daughter outside and stuff. Was that the guy?
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't remember if it was leading her outside or not, but it said his name was Wind, and then he heard what he put like a monitor in the room, and he heard what he thought was this creature talking in a weird like language, but then he realized it was his daughter talking in that, and so he kind of prayed that thing out of there, and but anyway, it named itself Wind, and that reminds me of an old ancient entity. I think it had to do more with like and the Sumerian culture. It was a demonic entity that named itself the Wind or something like that, and it was something similar.
I seem to recall something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
and I recall things in Native American. I have a certain amount of Native American heritage.
Yeah, it was Windy Man or something like that, and so yeah, I mean, that was a really bizarre story. And when he told it to me, it was like, man, I was just fascinated by it, and I kind of wouldn't mind interviewing him again on it, because it was so bizarre. I didn't even really know what questions to ask. It's like, man,
right.
That's crazy. And but anyway, they ended up getting rid of it, and the daughter, the daughter was the one talking to it mostly. So very interesting story.
I never really knew what to make of that story, of that situation. I was so young, but it's definitely something that I know happened, and right. I didn't have an explanation. They didn't have an explanation. But when we were talking before, I mentioned that it seemed like, that's early 90 something for me, and it seemed like for a period of time growing up that almost everybody around was kind of accepting and talking about their ghost stories and things like that. And then everything just went kind of totally scientific, for lack of a better term, right? To where people didn't feel comfortable about talking about it anymore. And it seems like that's kind of coming back around now, where people are tired of hiding that sort of thing. And your show, Vic's show, lots of other people are just invaluable, man. Like they really are, because that's the reason why I contacted you, is because I've had and heard about so many different varied things, experiences, that your show is the only one that I've really ever heard that is accepted or doesn't focus on one specific thing. You know, not to say that the other people aren't accepting. It's just they tend to focus on, you know, like Vic has the Dogman encounters, and then the Bigfoot one too, right? You know, he kind of keeps it separate too.
And he sent me some stories. If it was a Dogman encounter that sounded more supernatural, he would send those to me. He didn't want to touch that kind of stuff, and
right.
And, you know, because some of the encounters where the Dogman's in the house talking to the kids, scratching the kid and stuff like that. I had one lady and her son on, and you know, and he was telling what it was doing to him. You know, it scratching him and appearing in his bedroom, but it was appearing as a Dogman creature, and but it seemed more on the demonic side. By the way, you know, it wasn't like in the woods and stuff like that. So, yeah,
that makes me wonder too, man, about especially tying back to the not trusting any of this stuff just for self-protection. How do we know what anyone or can present themselves as? It reminds me of that movie Childhood, right? How these people that come that are, you know, aliens or whatever that come that are supposedly so benevolent, and they end up looking like the devil, and they end up destroying the whole planet. And the whole thing is through smoke and mirrors and acceptance. People just accepting that that's the way that it is. And so it kind of just ties back to all of this sort of thing, to where, biblical or not, it doesn't make any sense for us to view anything like this as benevolent until we know.
Yeah,
because we have
most of the UFO cases, for instance. If you dig deeper with the people who have these encounters, they also, most of them, maybe not all, but most of them also have paranormal activity, like shadow people in their house, or they have the dishes being moved around in the kitchen. And some of even the famous cases where you know, they're kind of very popular cases. When you got to looking a little deeper, they start disclosing later about like shadow people. One of them I remember, I can't remember the guy's name, but he had a lot of these UFO encounters, and it was a very popular story. And then he started submitting some pictures and stuff of these shadow people in his home, like even holding the remote to his TV and stuff like that. And then saying that, you know, dishes were being moved around in the kitchen and flying around the kitchen, and, you know, levitating kind of stuff. And, you know, it's like, dude, that's so it sounds like to me that these same aliens are also running a ghost house, you know, kind of deal, a haunted house.
Well, it seems like these kind of things run in a pack, and that's what makes people like me worry about it, right?
Yeah, even I don't the Bigfoot stuff. A lot of times the Bigfoot stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like, of course, you know, I'm sure a lot of people, and once again, this is not, you know, a way to make friends and influence people. This is not me or most anybody else trying to be famous or make money or anything like that. These are things that we didn't want to happen. So, you know, when we're telling these stories, it's just reaching out to other people and hoping that they had the same.
Yeah, and it helps other people to hear it from you, because there's like, dude, that happened to me, and it helps people learn. Like you said that you learn things that makes you think back and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Now you've also had some UFO encounters, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and you've also had these haunting things, and the, you know, and you got Bigfoot stories.
And I'm wondering if that's perception, because there's never been anything directly like malicious towards me that I know of, you know. But at the same time, as far as I know, not everybody sees ghosts. People up to them and start telling them their life story for no reason, and you know. sees UFOs, and you know what I mean? Like, not everybody has that happen to them. So I'm wondering why, and if, like we were talking about, is there a certain amount of perception? And the wand to the side of your head, as you were talking about, like, that seemed to open up your ability to see this entity in a door that opened in your wall, and possibly even allowed you to hear the roar that scared the hell out of all of you. So to me, it seems like there are different levels of perception, and I am more and more inclined to think that is based on what we will accept. Because certain people, no matter how much information you present to them,
maybe when you get older,
certainly will not accept it.
Yeah, maybe when you get older. But if the stuff happens to you when you're a kid, then you accept strangeness.
Right.
When you're old, like when you're young, because I wouldn't have accepted a red being with curled ram horns when I was a kid. Heck, I never saw a Halloween costume that looked like that. So that happened when I was a kid because my perception was wide open.
Man, maybe the dog man scratching the kids and stuff like that. The Sasquatch looking through the window and all that stuff.
From then, nothing seems too strange. When people tell me their stories and it's strange sounding, to me, it's like, well, my story sounds strange, so I can believe you because I don't want people to tell me I'm lying, so I can't really say they're lying. And a lot of times you can kind of tell too when someone tells you their story. You can tell by the way they tell it, and
your BS meter goes off.
Yeah, and plus, especially if you can see them, there's certain signs that are indicating of lying.
For sure.
Even like when they were calling something, like what direction they look, if if they're right-handed or left-handed, and things like that, because they'll look a certain direction. But you have to know if they're right-handed or left-handed, so you got to kind of pay attention. Like if they grab their drink or something, what hand they grab it with, and there's certain indicators you can look for. And I learned that from a judge, and so I try to vet the stuff, and most everything that I've covered, dude, if I could, vet it even halfway decent, it appears to me they're telling the truth. There's only a few cases that I don't know. It sounded kind of weird and fishy, but I can't prove it was, so I'm not going to call him a liar. I don't want people calling me a liar.
Well, and that's my thing too. Is I guess I'm to the point where I am prepared to accept anything, if the evidence is presented for it, but I'm not prepared to believe anything. At the same time, I'm not prepared to call anybody crazy, or just tell them that whatever they're saying is ridiculous. And that's kind of the thing when we were talking last night. We were talking about Dr. Melba Ketchum and her situation, and people that I have heard interviewed in ask questions in reference to her, and it's clear that they're either avoiding things that she's directly stated, scientifically, rigorously stated in all of her publications, or they didn't read it, right? So when people are looking to always corroborate a certain theory, that is scientism. That's a religion. That's not science. And we seem to, if this is going on this long, right? If missing 411, right? Even if 1/10 of that is connected to something that we seems to be connected to things like Dogman or Bigfoot or other entities, UFOs even. If even 1/10 of that is true, then everything we've been told is not factual. And so where does that come from? Why is it happening? And what is the mechanism that the practical on the ground funding and policy and all of that sort of mechanism that keeps it in place? And what is the ideology or the mentality, the information that convinces people to keep it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that convinced me about, because I've never seen a Dogman, the thing that convinced me about Dogman being true was the amount of stories and just listening to them, knowing what to listen for, and I think we kind of have a vibe of whether someone was telling
Yeah.
the truth or not. Kind of in a way, kind of like when you know someone's staring at you. There's certain nonverbal things that people do with tone and inflection and things like that that indicate whether someone's telling the truth. And most of the time, if someone's lying, they're not consistent. Because you know what I'm saying, and you can go to different other shows and hear me tell my Darrow story. I've always been consistent. I tell the exact same story every time. Because that's, and every once in a while I remember a little bit more or something, so I might add a little more detail, or because I've pondered about it and I've thought about it, and kind of like when you're saying I remembered this or I remembered that as we were talking,
Right.
So I've thought about things, but you'll never catch anything being inconsistent because I'm telling you exactly what I remember. And
Right.
and it's just the truth, And I even offered, it's like, look, if you want to say I'm lying about this Darrow story, or even the big or the devil story when I was a kid, or even the Bigfoot story, really. But I offered for the Darrow story in one of the videos I did. And I said, if you want, come down here, pay for a lie detector test, and you prove me wrong, I will sign a notary statement before I take it. And if I flunk the lie detector test, I will give you a Jeep Liberty and a boat. And
I remember you making that.
And that was several years back. That it was still worth good, decent money back then.
Right.
And no one took me up on that offer.
Well,
but several accused me of lying, but no one took me up on the offer because they knew I wasn't lying.
Well, there's a couple things about that though. Is I think that a lot of people are afraid that you're not lying, right? That's a lot more scary. The other thing is that these days I think that we know that we need to do better than lie detector tests because they can be beaten. What you were talking about earlier, I think, is more important. Understanding when people are like just telling you the truth, and I don't think it's just in inflection and the voice.
It's hard to beat a lie detector test. You have to almost believe your own lie. And there might be some people that beat lie detector tests because they believe their own lie. But
that's what I mean. I don't think that you're
determine whether or not you think I'm that kind of person. I don't want to believe a lie. I've been searching for the truth. I tried to dismiss the stuff.
Right. I don't think that your intention is to lie.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to believe something different from what I was believing because I didn't want to believe that. Because it was scary. I mean, keeps you from sleeping a lot of nights. I sleep with a light on still to this day. I never sleep with lights off. I'm serious.
I don't blame you.
I know.
Light. I'm not laughing at. I don't laugh. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because it has to be. It has to be true, man. Like those sorts of experiences, and I hear them from other people, but I'm glad that mine have not been. I've never felt anything malicious, from any experiences that I've had.
It seems like they always have to touch me. You think about it. The devil encounter, it grabbed me.
Right.
And physically manipulated me, trying to take me through the wall. Okay, then the Darrow one, it physically grabbed me. And it stuck something to the side of my head. And
right.
and another entity enters in, and then another entity hollers in, and it's like it always seems to be physical. The Bigfoot, what did it do? It reached in my tent and grabbed me. It grabbed me through the tent, and it reached in to grab me. They always seem to have to freaking touch me, man. And that makes it that much more traumatic because it's like, dang, how can I ever be safe? Because you can't defend
So
yourself
are
against this
you
kind of thing other than prayer.
right?
And depending on the Lord to protect you. Because if they're coming in and they're touching you, and it seems like in two of the cases, at least the devil and the Darrow thing, that they were trying to abduct me. Man, it was because I've had a story on my show where the Darrow did abduct a guy, and 6 months later he like comes to himself in New York, walking the streets. He had a haircut and everything. He doesn't know remember how he got there, but he remembered being in the jail underground. He kind of came to. They
Mm-hmm.
apprehended him. They had this wand like thing. Another wand like thing. They pointed and shot his friend with it, and he believed it killed his friend. And this was out in
Right.
Arizona. And then they pointed at him, and they zapped him, and then they came over to him and put this headband like thing around his head that had these big silver discs on them. And then every time he would like come to and start to notice what was going on, they would point the wand at him, and then he would not remember. And
That makes me
there was one point he came to, and he
right.
was in a jail underground, and the reason he knows that is because there was a girl sitting next to him. There was other people there too, but he like looks over at her, and he's kind of like asked what was going on, and she said, "You're in a Darrow cave or Darrow jail or whatever, Darrow prison
Right.
underground," and that was the last thing he remembered about that. And then all of a sudden he was walking the streets in New York, and that was exactly what Richard Shaver said that they would do. They had prisons underground where they would hold slaves that they would abduct, and they would abduct people from the surface and take them underground and make slaves out of them. And how he got loose or how he got out of there, I don't know.
That makes me think of something that I think it was missing 411. I'm actually pretty positive. And what's his name? David Pilates?
Yeah, David Pilates.
He was talking about how he was never able to get a hold of the guy, but it's a story of the classic just disappeared instantly somehow, and nobody saw him, and then he woke up, I want to say somewhere near the Great Lakes or something, or maybe even in Canada, laying on the ground, I want to say early morning, with clothes that he didn't recognize and a backpack and maps. Yeah, it makes you wonder why, A, he won't talk about it, and B, if he didn't have the same kind of experience.
Right. Yeah.
So it might sound weird in context, but you're talking about you being physically, grabbed, other kids being, physically scratched, and that phenomenon. Are you familiar with Joseph Goebbels and what he did with people, as well as Ewan Cameron, as far as what do you call it, trauma-based predictive programming?
No.
So this quite apparently evil person connected to a socio-political military movement that was into quote-unquote occult sort of stuff. He was apparently, he bragged about how many different personalities he could fracture a person's mind into by inducing what he called trauma-based predictive programming or suggestion, right? Like inducing all kinds of different trauma on the person.
Right, I've heard of that kind of stuff, yes. Right.
Right. So I'm wondering, since these are the type of people that we're talking about, how they're, potentially, I'm talking about the Nazis, right? Potentially talking to aliens and all of the weird, dark, occult sort of stuff that Hitler was into and other people around him were into. And the things that they expressed in our world, the things that they were doing to people like that, the trauma-based predictive programming, and then other people in the paranormal sort of spectrum, the more traumatic it is, it's really traumatic when it's physical, right? So I'm wondering if it's not the same kind of expression, right? Somebody or something is kind of preparing other people by inflicting trauma upon them. For what? I don't know, but...
Right. Yeah, and luckily, it seems to me that I've had intervention come in to protect me.
Right, and like the guy that like says that he left the Illuminati after all this crazy stuff happened to him. I don't need to get too deep, but the same kind of occult stuff. And Luciferianism, Satanism, it doesn't really matter what it is, like kind of getting into dark stuff. They all say that there was some sort of centering thing that pulled them out of, some sort of protective force, that intervened before they went too far.
Right. Yes. And that's really interesting stuff. And I've looked into it, and kind of studied it some. And it's really hard stuff to vet. Because it's so vague,
Exactly.
it's not vague. I mean, they seem to have a lot of detail, but it's so hard to prove. It makes you wonder whether or not that's their perception of what happened, but you can't deny that if they have multiple personalities, that's what's going on. But then, to me, it seems like if you have more than one personality, that almost seems like you have a demonic possession and you need to be rid of it. You know what I'm saying? Because you have only one personality. I mean, typically, you have you, and and if you have another personality that's in you that goes by a different name, then that to me almost sounds like demonic possession, and that's the trickery. That's what I've wondered about. It's like, look, if you get some prayer for that, you can cast out those other personalities, and because the Lord can heal, He can save, He can save to the uttermost, and someone that has, they call themselves, by their real name, like Brenton, and then they say they have another name that's Lucy, or that's not normal, and it's not. I don't think that's that you can fragment your personality in such a way that you could have different identities in the same personality. It almost sounds to me more like a possession, because they've not fully come out of what the deception was. You get what I'm saying? It
certainly doesn't sound healthy. Yeah, no, I do, and it certainly doesn't seem healthy at the very least.
Right, yeah. And if the Lord saves to the uttermost, then if you were saved, then how could you still have those kind of things when He could heal you from these kind of things? Because and sometimes you hear some of these people that believe they have these multiple personalities, and they'll like bring up the other personality and talk, and it'll be a whole different accent and everything. So it's like, dude, that's not another personality. That is another person.
That's kind of what I'm saying, is that regardless of whether any individual would believe it or not, a lot of these people that seem to be manifesting the same thing in the real world, right, definitely believed that they were privy to some sort of ethereal information, right? Like that's what they believed. And then when we see it expressed in the real world, it's kind of hard to deny when, like I said, they seem to be expressing the same sort of things. They call it different stuff, but why would you just terrorize somebody, right? Unless you're getting something from it, right? Why would you just imprison somebody for a long time and then just to release them unless you're getting something from it? So, just like I forget which author it was, but he said something about any sufficiently advanced technology would appear as magic, right?
Right.
It ties right back to what I was saying before, the wand thing and everything. It could be technology. It could be to something, all of it, anything presented to us that's kind of beyond us would appear paranormal or any other, and very well may be to us. Like, we live in a certain physical existence and perception, for that's all we can experience, like, just
Right.
period, to a certain level. So it doesn't really behoove us to interact with any of the rest of that any more than we have to, and a lot of us didn't ask for it. So there has to be a way for us to combat it too, right? And
Right.
I don't know if you've heard about it, but recently I've heard, even in the UFO field, some of the oldest people researching this stuff looked back. I can't remember what his name is, but he was talking about how he was researching UFO abductions, and somewhere along the line he became a Christian. He became born again. So he had kind of a schism in his own mind about pursuing these sort of things that he saw in the Christian as demonic, that he saw as his calling, but at the same time seemed like it was contrary to his faith. So he said that he prayed and he got an answer back that was, you have everything you need. You already have everything that you need to answer your question. So he decided that meant to go back and look at everything, review everything that he had done. And I think it was one of the very first interviews he was talking about. He said that him and his partner, they were watching these old VHS tapes, and he said that what struck him was this guy that they were interviewing, said that he stopped what he thought was an alien abduction, and he found himself slammed back into his bed. And the thing that stopped that was calling on the name of Jesus Christ. And what was more interesting about his testimonial, I wish I could remember his name, but is that he started calling other hosts that talk about UFOs and paranormal sort of things, and asking them about this thing. Have you ever heard of anybody being able to stop? He wasn't focusing on Jesus at all. He was asking them if they knew of a way, heard of anybody else saying that they had a way of stopping an alien abduction willfully. And all of them, apparently, most of them at least, immediately asked to go off the record and said that they had been hearing that over and over and over again for years, but they didn't want to talk about it because they didn't want to damage their credibility with talking about UFOs and Jesus.
Yeah, I've got a video on that actually, and it's I call it like the MUFON deception, because a lot of people say
right.
There's a government cover up, but I said that I was saying that there was a MUFON cover up. The MUFON's covering up the truth, because they don't want to let you know that they have come across these stories these things were stopped. And I think I presented one case where this guy was being held up in the air by a pole that was stuck into his rectum.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's demonic.
How
you know
very
what I'm saying? And he would call on
Yeah.
Jesus, and it would stop. He would automatically fall back down to his bed. And there's other cases too, but the researcher, I can't remember his name either right now because it's been a while since I did it. But he basically, did just exactly what you're saying. He started researching into it and found that there was a way to stop it, and it was by calling on the Lord. And so since then I've mentioned cases that people have sent me, where they'd have an alien gray in their bedroom, and they would say the name of Jesus, and they would say that it was like hitting them with a ball bat. It would actually knock them back until they were outside their room looking in a window, it was like Jesus, and it was like bam. It was almost as if they were getting hit by something physical.
Huh.
Bam, and it would knock them back, and they would say Jesus, and then bam, Jesus, bam, and then they keep saying it until it was like they went back and went through the wall, and they were outside looking in the window, and so to me, it was like, okay, then why would they fly across all these light years to teach New Age doctrine? Because that's what they do. They you know what I'm saying? It's like they teach you there's doom and gloom coming on the earth, and we're here to save you, and it's not. And it's all New Age. It really is. When you look at what they're teaching. Jesus was just a enlightened one, and it's all New Age doctrine. Yeah. But then when you say the name of Jesus, it hurts them, and they have to leave. So. It's just not true.
So
what they're saying ain't true. And over time, they've said that we were from Mars, and then we see Mars. And then they had to say, oh, we're from Jupiter. And then all of a sudden, we got pictures of Jupiter, and we realized they're not living there. And then it's like, okay, we're from Pleiades, and they had to go, they changed their story, from... Do
you know who David Flynn is?
But I think they live in the Earth. I think they live inside the Earth.
That's a decent hypothesis, I think. Actually, in ways, I don't know. There's a lot of
they're
new
diverting
stuff
your attention to look
there's
up.
a lot of new stuff for me anyway. There's a lot of new stuff to research about that could make it very
think about
possible.
the account of
and I don't even know
creation.
if there isn't.
Look at the account of creation. God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, and
right,
and then he tells what the purpose of the heavens were. It was so that you could discern like the times and the seasons, and there'd be a lesser light and and a greater light and stuff like that. So there's the sun and the moon, and because the sun shines on the moon and it reflects light back to the earth, so it kind of lights it up at night a little bit, kind of look a little night light, and the stars going across the heavens. It helps people to know when fall was, and because they didn't have calendars and they didn't have like a cell phone they could check and see what the date was, stuff like that. But you could tell by
all of that stuff is based on the heavens anyway.
Right? Yeah, and I started noticing that when I started looking at the sky, and I would notice like in the fall. Or the summer, I don't remember what way it was, but when I lived in this one particular house for several, like 11 years, I noticed in different times a year, you would see Orion and Orion's belt and stuff like that, and then certain times of year you would see the Big Dipper, and and I know they went a lot by the summer and winter solstice and stuff like that. But you could tell what season it was by where the positioning of these stars were, and since I had the time where I could say, okay, at 3:00 the Orion was here, but a month later 3:00 Orion was over there. Okay, so that's one of the reasons they had to go by the winter and summer solstice. When it would rise up and be in a perfect spot, then they could recalculate where they were at. You know what I'm saying? Because that's going to be very consistent and not really changing in such a way that it would be really hard to keep up with. You'd have to keep up with it each day and calculate it and what have you to. But anyway, you could look at the stars and the motion of the stars. And the sun and the moon and stuff like that to tell what season it was, and so that became like a way to tell. Because how else would you know when it was winter season? How else would you know that when a year had passed? You know what I'm saying?
True.
So they would develop these rock formations or whatever, where certain time of year the sun would come up over this rock. and shine across in this one spot, and you knew right then, okay, we're at this time of year for sure. Because how many times you had to look at the calendar this month to see what date it was? I've had to several times. It's like, okay, what
right?
is
Yeah,
today?
me
Is
too.
today Saturday? Is today Friday? Or that kind of stuff. And you imagine if you worked out in the woods, or you worked out in the countryside, how would you know what the date was? How would you know, how close it was getting to spring? Are you
It's
keeping track
interesting
of
that you
each and
should
every
say that.
day?
That's interesting that you should say that, because that's exactly how me and my daughter and my girlfriend at the time saw a bona fide UFO. Was me talking about her constellations and talking to her about the Farmer's Almanac and all of that stuff out in the same mountains that I grew up in, that we go camping out in. And they had changed a lot of roads out there. They were putting like a power line through, and a lot of the roads had been blocked off. But there was one main gravel road that went through there, and I got looped around and ended up going back towards the highway. And just because driving around looking at stuff all day, we ended up camping at the end of this road that was, maybe 50, 75 yards or so. Well, maybe like 100 yards away from the road. This highway that went through there. I think it's Highway 26 that goes through there. And anyway, there was this big open area at the dead end of this road, in some trees that we set up camping for the night. And the next night we went in deeper into the mountains. We just got tired of driving that night. And we were sitting next to the campfire, and we started talking about the stars and everything. And it's, out on top of a mountain. It's out in the middle of nowhere, so there's no, lights. So we decided that we're going to go walk down the road and look at the stars. And we walked, 50 yards or so down the road, way far enough away from the campfire that was back in the cluster of trees. And there was no traffic driving down the highway or anything. And we were looking at stars and pointing out constellations and stuff. And I think it was me that saw a really bright star. We were talking about the difference between stars and planets and stuff too, and why planets look brighter. To my daughter, who was like 9 years old at the time, she was sitting on my shoulders, and my girlfriend at the time was standing to my right, and the highway that I was talking about, based on the way we were facing, was running perpendicular to us, from the left to the right. And I said that particular star was really bright, and my girlfriend said, "Is that a star?" Questioning. I don't remember exactly how she said it, but are you sure that's a star or something like that? And it kept getting bigger as it came towards us, like directly in line with us, kind of a little bit to the right, I guess, coming straight towards us, like perpendicular to the road. And it just kept getting bigger, and it was really bright, and until it got to about where it was the highway, and then it took a really sharp, abrupt left, and it was moving, like a snake slithers. If you've seen a snake swim through the water, that's how it was moving. And it was so bright that it was leaving like a tracer trail. If you see something really bright, like a sparkler or something, you move it and you see that tracer trail. That's what it looked like as it was going past us, completely silent, probably like basketball or beach ball size, brilliant, bright white light. And we didn't really say anything. We just saw it come directly towards us and then take an abrupt left. And it was, kind of moving back and forth slowly, silently to our left, and like it was following the highway. And there wasn't any traffic on the highway. There was nothing there to project the light to see. And when it got down, I don't know, a few miles, 4 or 5 miles probably up the highway from where we were, there was a state campground. And we had passed there earlier and saw that there was a whole bunch of people there. And so we didn't stop there. We were looking for a more secluded place. And you could tell when it was pretty close to being right over the top of that, it just blinked out, disappeared. It wasn't like the light shut off, like it was projecting light, like a physical object projecting light and it shut off. It was like it disappeared. It wasn't darkening any of the stars behind it. It just disappeared. And we tried to, rationalize it in every way, like a drone or some sort of aircraft. It definitely wasn't any sort of conventional aircraft, that's for sure. It wasn't a helicopter or an airplane. There's no way it could have been a drone. We couldn't figure out what it was. So yeah, the classic unidentified flying object. That's what it was, but that's what happened.
Okay. Yeah, that's very bizarre. And it moved like in a snake-like motion, huh?
Yeah, like slowly back and forth, like it was like nonchalant. It was really slow. Not really, really slow, but not.
But smooth,
not
and it couldn't have been like a meteor or anything like that, or a satellite, because it's snaking.
No.
Okay. Wow.
Specifically right there. Oh, I guess I didn't say that. It was going in front of us, like the hill where we were at. It's like upper montane forest. There's a lot of big, tall, coniferous trees, evergreen trees. And the direction we're looking, that it went uphill. So as it's going in front of us, the cut of where the road went was below the ridge line. So it was flying below the ridge line, and it didn't really project light, but it was definitely going. It was really bright, but it didn't really project light other than the little tracer thing. So it wasn't lighting up the trees or anything, but it was definitely in front of them and below the ridge. It wasn't in the sky. It was, to us, but it wasn't in the sky like a satellite or a star would be. It was right there, 75 yards away, maximum.
Okay, so that's pretty darn close. All right, and you think about a lot of the stories where the Bigfoot and stuff live.
Right.
It's kind of common knowledge that they live where the evergreen trees are because it gives better cover. Like that's where they sleep. What I'm saying, that's where they would bed down and things like that. So it puts it typically on like a certain side of the mountain where they grow more, and it gives them better cover and things like that. So if you would see these things down into the tree line in those kind of areas, that makes you wonder again if there's some kind of connection with both of them. I mean, it just like over time you gather a big picture. You know what I'm saying? Over time it seems like we get this so much data that you can begin to formulate a big picture and the commonalities and stuff like that of all the information. And to me, that would make sense. If it were related to Bigfoot, that would be the area that they would be bedding down in, because that's pretty much kind of a common knowledge among the researchers that they bed down in the areas where the green, all year round trees are.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, and I don't know how it all connects, but like you said, like a larger scope, like kind of stepping back at all of the research from all these different fields, it seems like there's some sort of commonality between all of it, and I'm not sure what it is, but
it's still a commonality.
It's a commonality, and it doesn't we have no reason to believe whatsoever that it's benevolent. Not to get political or anything, but disarming people is not the answer and never has been throughout history. But imagine being able to get an entire race on an entire planet to disarm themselves, right?
Dude,
and like you said,
no, and the government seems to be trying to do that. And then you take instances like in the scriptures where it says that in the end times that there would be a beast come out of the pit, Abaddon come out of the pit, and he's giving command over the beast of the earth to kill a fifth part of mankind. Now, if there was such a thing as Illuminati and they wanted to try to overthrow, the world and what have you, and try to beat God and all that kind of stuff, then
definitely wouldn't want them fighting back.
Yeah, you would want to disarm people. And then bring this army of it would be tough to kill an army of Bigfoot and Dogmen, and it seems like that they're on the edges of the woods reconning people more and more because take people like Mark Zaxby who's out there in Florida. He's in a woods right beside a golf course taking pictures and actually capturing these Bigfoot on pictures, and then he'll pan over to the side a little bit, and there's a golf course, people on it. How many cases that we hear that where people are in a state park and the kids are playing on the swings, and these things are on the edge of the woods watching, or they're coming to the people's houses and taking stuff out of their orchards or what have you. They're not way out there in the woods. A lot of times they're on the outskirts of society, barely trying to hide, and they're able to do it because people are not even looking for it. They can just sit in the bushes and just stay still, and you'll walk right by them because you're not looking.
That's what I'm wondering.
They can throw something at you that doesn't make any sense, and you still dismiss it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's what I'm wondering, if there is any sort of distinction, like who is and who isn't our enemies, right? Or if, like your previous guest was talking about in his books, making some sort of distinction between these different creatures, and I guess other people have too, or whether or not all of this, like the things that you were just describing, are like David Paulides is talking about, it's just a result of certain people or certain sort of establishment ignoring this stuff for so long that now the populations are so large and widespread, and like you said, people don't perceive them as being real anyway, so they can get stuff thrown at them and they don't even we just rationalize it away. So is it that? Is it a combination of different things? I don't know. All I know is that my experiences have awakened me to the fact that there's something going on, and I didn't even really know how much testimony there was until I heard the right testimony from a couple different people that couldn't have known each other, and then also having my own experiences that people seem to not want to talk about, even if they've had those experiences. So there's definitely more than what to the universe in general than what we perceive. But I have to stand strong on, we don't have any reason to think that any of that is benevolent. There's just too much room for deception.
Right. Yeah. And with the biblical nature of the analysis that I've done, it seems to me like there's something wrong with it, not something right with it. If you're a biblical believer, if you're a Bible believer, you know that there's not something else made in the image of God besides humans. So if these things are so human-like, then and they're giants because they tend to be like 8-10 feet tall and stuff like that, just like the Nephilim in the scriptures. It makes you have to really, ponder the idea that they might be Nephilim, hybrid creatures of between the angelic and the human, and and the DNA evidence that Melvin Ketchum and others have come up with pointed out the same thing. But the scientific community will peer review it some, but they'll always come up a little short on giving them like 3 peer reviews, so that they can't publish it in a legit magazine. That's why Melvin Ketchum ended up buying a magazine so that she could get it published. But her evidence was legit, man. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what she was a top DNA researcher in the world, dude. I mean, people came to her with
I'm no geneticist.
Yeah,
but what I saw as the so-called rebuttal to her really wasn't. It was more of just ridicule. And like I said before, it didn't seem like they were presenting anything that refuted her. They were just
they were trying to say it was contaminated. They were saying it was contaminated, but they had strict protocols on how to gather the information, and that's why they had certain people gathering the info. And some of the people were like J.C. Johnson and Scott Carpenter and things like that. And they followed the protocols on gathering the info. And the only reason they were saying it was contaminated because it was coming up as part human on the mitochondrial side, and in part it was unknown on the nuclear side, which meant that it had a human mother and a unknown father. But that's exactly what Nephilim would be. So, so they're like, oh, it's got to be contaminated because of that. But it's like, no, it's got to be Nephilim because of that. It depends on what you're looking at, or your line of thinking.
Well, it's definitely, that's what I mean. It's definitely bombshell, and they weren't, like I said earlier, I think that they were engaging in scientism rather than science.
They're wanting to keep the theory of evolution going, so they're not going to acknowledge it. And that's the real beast, is the evolution theory. And so they're not going to ever let anything else come forth to prove that scriptures is true. And a lot of people think, they're covering up because of this or that, and but they're really covering up because of the theory of evolution. Because
I definitely don't prescribe to macro evolution, and maybe we should talk another time about just that line of stuff, because it kind of gets a little deep for some people, I suppose.
Yeah.
And that's that's not really what
microevolution. Maybe yes, but not macro.
Yeah.
And
right.
So therefore the species produce after their own kind. And the kind, when it comes to angelic and human, are close enough to still reproduce. Because what's the scriptures say? Let's make them after our own image. Let us make them after our own image. And so, that angelic beings are close enough to human beings to be still the same kind, but the glory of the flesh is different, as Apostle Paul said. And
that's what I mean. Like, this could go, like, we could have at least a couple hour long conversation about that whole line of thinking. And I would love to.
That would be an interesting one for sure.
Because it ties into, real human origin, and I would would love to talk about that sort of thing, because I think it ties into everything that we've been talking about. But like I said, it's not necessarily something that everybody tunes in for when they're checking out UFOs and Bigfoot and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's a big step to even realize that, or allow yourself to think about that Bigfoot or UFOs or shadow people or ghosts or anything like that can even exist, let alone all of them existing simultaneously and all of them, having some sort of connection to one another. They're all big steps in themselves.
Right.
So
anyway, I think that we've covered enough for tonight, and let's wrap it up, and maybe you and me will talk on the side again, and maybe come up with a show on Nephilim and stuff like that, and because there's a lot of people that do like that topic, and just different theories. We throw the theory out there, and you can believe it or not, and I'll even throw other theories out there. I don't mind telling what other theories are too, and then you make up your mind what makes the most sense to you, and so anyway, thank you for coming on, buddy, and just hold on the line there, and I'll end the show here. And everybody out there in YouTube land, I really appreciate you listening. And I could really use the contributions to help me keep this show going. And like I said, I think I said earlier that I've actually recorded a few shows, and the audio on the shows were so choppy, where it was like chopped up on the syllables so bad that I couldn't use the audio, and then so I'm gonna have to go back and after they get their phone situation changed up and get some of those stories again, and I've done another pre-interview on a show that's going to be really interesting. That the guy said he would come back on probably in a week. He had a stroke recently, and he's trying to get where he can speak better. He sounded good to me, but when I talked to him, he had a super cool story of a really, really close-up encounter with a Bigfoot. And it's so interesting. It's like, dude, you got to share this, even if you don't want to share your name or, alter your voice or whatever. But the story is really cool, and I don't want to give it away because I want it to kind of be a surprise. But just, I'm telling you this, he had a really close-up encounter, and it's a really interesting story. So please consider making a contribution, because I do need it. I had even videos demonetized just yesterday. I had 2 videos they demonetized again, just slowly picking off the shows and what have you, and it's a tough time. So I can really appreciate the help. And thank you, Dan. Thank you, audience. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.